If you like this video, please consider supporting me on Patreon. For just $1 a month, your name can appear at the beginning of this and many other upcoming videos.
Now who can we get to clean up all this garbage?
That does not look good for his digestion. As the season reaches the end of its first half, we get another Royal Sister episode to help wrap things up. Between Dawn and Dusk is probably the type of episode people have been wanting to see for a while. Getting to see the sisters outside of their responsibilities and just hanging out. And as far as the premise goes, they actually did a pretty good job pulling it off. When the sisters get a little bit too involved in saving the day, they become interested in exploring the outside world and take a vacation, leaving Twilight and the others in charge. The sisters are having fun at first, but eventually start to have a hard time deciding on activities. In the meantime, Twilight is having a hard time putting together a celebration party for swans? Man, these parties just get more and more ridiculous. So, how does the episode handle these two stories? We did get a Royal Sister story before and a Royal Problem, but that was more about Starlight helping them with their bickering problem, so we don't really learn much about them. This episode, however, feels like a much better approach to the problem since the sisters get to work off each other without any outside interference. We get much more personality and chemistry between these two than we ever have in previous episodes. Learning about their interests, seeing new sides of them, letting themselves loose, and just being a pair of cute, adorable nerds. It really develops their characters in ways that haven't been done before, having them just be fun-loving explorers instead of mystical gods for everyone to worship. It's a nice way of showing how people in a higher position of power can be regular people too. And the best part is that none of it feels out of character. We have seen Celestia and Luna display behavior like this before, so it's really fun to see an episode expanding on these elements of their personalities. And it's also pretty impressive how the writers give the two diverse and separate interests that make total sense for their characters. Luna speculates people's dreams, so she would definitely be interested in an art gallery. Celestia is more familiar with daily activities, so she'd definitely be into sports and looking into caverns. It's also interesting to see how these activities actively mirror their usual moods. Celestia, whose days are peaceful and in order, seeks activities filled with fast-paced action and adrenaline, and Luna, who experiences chaotic stuff in people's dreams, just wants to chill out and relax. It's almost like they're seeking out the exact opposite of what you'd expect them to be interested in, which is a pretty fun play on their personalities. It's also nice to see how they don't spend the whole time bickering and their annoyance builds up steadily over time. We still get to see them being lively and adorable and just hanging out as close sisters. It especially helps that the episode is paced really well between these two subplots. The transitions between them aren't badly timed and the build-up between them feels steady and patient. So we get to see the sisters' relationship and interests at a modest level. They seem to express a lack of accomplishment early on, which would explain why they feel excited about this vacation. There's a visual element in the song that shows how they felt trapped within the castle for a long time. So this vacation gives them a sense of freedom they've been longing for, and they express that sense of freedom very strongly. Celestia bathing herself in all those stuffed animals like she's a little kid when she enters a Toys R Us. Luna gushing over the post office because she never got a chance to experience it before. It really feels like they're exploring the outside world for the first time, not bound by any royal duties and just doing things they could never do as princesses. It just feels really cute and wholesome. For the last 1,000 years, they've never really had a chance to be themselves. They feel like they've missed out in a lot of things and wanted to feel more involved in the world they've been ruling over, which would reinforce why they were forcing themselves in situations that weren't urgent. With Luna being imprisoned for 1,000 years and Celestia being responsible for so much by herself within that time, it's a refreshing experience for these two to get to do all these things and do them together. The subplot involving Twilight setting up the Swan celebration, while not as interesting as the other subplot, still deals with its premise pretty well. It's clearly a means to give her practice for ruling Equestria when the sisters retire, and given the way that it's framed, it seems like a reasonable learning experience. It works as an insight to the flaws of bureaucracy and teaching Twilight how delegation works. It's not much, but it makes for good practice. And it's also a pretty clever allegory for the episode as a whole, showing not only the sisters stretching their wings, but also giving Twilight some room to test hers. Then comes the scene where the sisters start arguing, and I was actually pretty impressed with how it was handled. It's not over the top and in your face, but it's not lacking either. Getting getting just the right information across as they speak their minds. It brings up an emotional barrier that's gone unresolved for a long time while referencing their past, which helps establish the still existing tension between them. It was interesting to see how Celestia felt about having to handle so much on her own for 1,000 years while blaming herself, since she knows it was Luna's jealousy of her that led to her corruption. It's a pretty subtle piece of dialogue in spite of the loud and straightforward delivery of the voice acting. It's a scene that shows how the sisters normally get along, but their underlying issues can still occur, especially since they don't interact as much as we might think, since they've been shown to have very different sleeping hours. They don't have a lot in common while also having a strong sense of pride, and those things together would obviously lead to conflict between them. But what really makes it interesting is that they managed to keep the arguing constructive and not have it undermine their love for each other. It's a surprisingly organic scene, and one that I didn't even realize was something they needed. And it makes the ending where they make up and get back together all the more effective. The chemistry between them was really well written up to this point, and the episode did a pretty good job showing their introvert-extrovert sibling dynamic. What brings them back together isn't just an apology for each other's bad behavior. It's developing a closer understanding for each other and what they've been through over the years. It really wasn't easy for Celestia to be the older sibling, which made her feel even worse when Luna became jealous. She was forced to banish her, which left her in a state of guilt for a very long time. And Luna was also forced into isolation. She had to endure it by herself, which robbed her of a lot of social skills and adapting to changes on the surface world. Not to mention that constantly living in the shadow of her older sister and never getting recognition for her work was pretty hard on her. They think about putting themselves in each other's shoes and start to think about the other in a new light. It's a really deep moment between them that just feels really warm and precious. It really shows how much they care about each other, and for the first time in so long, they left behind the royalness and focused on the sister aspect of their relationship. I do have one issue with the episode, and it's how Celestia comes across as more selfish. While the two were being equally stubborn, Celestia felt more to blame since she was really starting to hijack the vacation in her favor, going ahead of Luna, dragging her along instead of giving her a chance to rest, and forcing them to leave the opera early despite that it was her turn. The system they were going for was perfectly fine until she started trying to take charge. She doesn't take a moment to think she's wearing Luna down, and it offsets the balance in the argument in some way. I feel like it would have been better if maybe Luna started to act selfish too. Something to even out the situation better, because it makes it feel less sympathetic on Celestia's end when they're supposed to have the same amount of blame. Well, despite that, Between Dawn and Dusk was a pretty good episode and a nice spot to take a break. It's a much better episode than A Royal Problem, as it has a better conflict while deepening the relationship between the sisters much more effectively. It teaches a really good lesson about siblings getting along, and the story has a really wholesome and heartwarming tone to it. It's definitely amongst the best of Season 9 so far. So until next time, take care of yourselves and stay awesome. This is Map signing out.